The Battle of Victoria Crater by Jackson Allen. Read by Jeremiah Jones. Thanks for joining us. Jackson Allen writes science fiction stories, and I'm a voice actor. Quick housekeeping notes before we get started. If you like what you hear, please take a moment to hit those like and subscribe buttons so you can hear when we put out new stories. You can purchase an ebook copy of The Battle of Victoria Crater at Inkican.com/braintacos. If you'd like to hire me for voice acting, my Instagram handle is JeremiahJonesVO. Now that we've got that out of the way, sit back, relax, and enjoy The Battle of Victoria Crater.
Merc bandits appeared on the south border of Victoriaville just before dawn. No warning given. A hit-and-run attack with two fast-moving hovercraft. They vented our fragile farm domes to the brassy Martian sky with blitzer fire and shot up our reactor. We had until sundown to patch the holes and restore power in the Tomahawk. Otherwise, our crops would die in the freezing cold of a Meridiani Planum night.
Ugly business, Captain Junior grumbled. We had been up all night hauling rolls of thick white polyethylene out of storage. Two of our town's engineers used the plastic to seal the holes in the domes and restore atmosphere. Manual labor is miserable in any circumstance, but doing it in an EVA suit is a nightmare. Our helper bots were dead without power, forcing us to do everything by hand. The work exhausted us, leaving everyone grouchy and scared. I helped Captain Junior unpack another roll of plastic. Why can't they just leave us alone? Captain Junior's crisp South African accent buzzed through my headset into my ears. Economic chaos, young Martin, he says. As long as we're here, WTO's claim against the land is contested. If we leave, they take over. Everything your dad fought for and died for would be gone. Captain Junior was a patient man. He would rather negotiate than fight. He would rather be hurt than hurt someone. Sometimes, though, his patience looked like cowardice, especially when you looked at it through 15-year-old eyes. Does this mean we're going to call the gunfighters in? I don't think we have a choice anymore, Captain Junior said. Then he muttered something ugly in Afrikaans, too polite to swear in English. I know he was picturing the arguments that would happen after we got our stuff fixed. Everyone seemed to dread the violence that was bound to follow. Personally, I was down for a little violence. On paper, Martian terraforming is supposed to be a collective, cooperative effort. Then our friendly Neighborhood Earth Corporation, WTO, arrived. Within weeks, colonization turned into an undeclared land war. They pulled no punches, hiring soldiers right out of the surface for gigs on the Red Planet. Guys like Captain Junior, if he wanted it, had an instant job waiting for him. All they had to do was harass unarmed civilians like us until we gave up and left. If that happened, WTO would swoop in. Some sleazy lawyer would buy us out at a fraction of the cost and not lose a minute's sleep. This isn't a joke. It's actually happened. Some ag outfits have folded up shop. Their families shut down operations to return to Mon City. Now, they're starving in the street. They wrote to us daily, begging for help. But there's nothing we could do. Mom knew them personally, people she trained with when she first came to Mars. Hearing about them sends her into a major shame spiral. No crops to grow, no work, and no welfare system. Mom cried every night from stress. I could hear her through the thin fiberboard walls of our habitat. Captain Junior insists that combat is not the answer. All I wanted when I retired was some land and a little peace and quiet, Captain Junior always says. I'm not up for another fight. The other adults alternated between wringing their hands and writing strongly worded emails. Nobody cared. Mars security admin laughed off their complaints. We don't enforce territory boundaries, they kept saying. You'll have to make your claim elsewhere. Everyone knows the truth. WTO and Mars Security are both funded by the same earthbound multinational corp. What are 100 poor farmers to an army of lawyers and mercenaries?
It took all day to seal the domes and get the tokamak back online. That night, we met in the big multi-purpose room. Some wanted to vent. Others wanted to fight. A couple of adults were ready to surrender.
It's time we consider an exit strategy,
Mr. Joshua proclaimed.
I don't like it any more than you do, but we have no choice.
Silence, you coward!
Jensen Blake roared in his New York accent.
We're not abandoning our home to starve on the streets with our children. Bickering gets us nowhere, Captain Junior reminded us. We all know who the real enemy is. Fighting amongst ourselves is exactly what they want. Mom spoke up. But what are we going to do? She rarely contributed to the meetings. We can't hold out forever. I know, Anna, Captain Junior said in a gentler voice. We've run out of time and options. That's why I think it's time for us to vote on hiring a gunfighter. Uncomfortable murmurs. They had discussed this in the past, with no decision made. Hire a mercenary to fight mercenaries? I still have my objections, Mr. Joshua said, but I won't stand in the way. My question is, what do we do if it doesn't work? I don't know if anyone else has noticed our books. We're just about out of spending money. If this guy doesn't come through, we're sunk. Captain Junior nodded in grim agreement. I won't argue the point. We're in a tight spot. The good news is that if our plan succeeds, it puts the matter to rest for a long time. Our claim will pass the homesteading rules according to the terraforming office. Even if he isn't completely successful, we'll at least have some weapons of our own. The captain ended the meeting, and for the next 10 days, nothing happened. As boring as that sounds, we were as tense as snakes. Every minute of every day, I scanned the horizon, looking for a hint of metal or color. One evening, a false alarm almost caused a riot. On the 11th day, Mom told me to take a breakfast tray into the comm center. Captain Junior was up early and speaking to someone in the little shed. I rigged a special encryption module, he explained when I arrived. I can't trust that WTO isn't tapping our lines. Our man arrives in a few hours, and I don't want him to get ambushed. I helped the engineers unclog a water pipe on our Atmo processor. Our crops don't produce enough oxygen for us yet, so we use a portable air maker. At the appointed time, I grew nervous. No rooster tails of dust appeared on the horizon. What if Captain Junior was wrong? What if the WTO outsmarted us again? A sound jolted me out of my thoughts. Something big, an aircraft, flew toward us. The only people who could afford to travel by air were the government, or the WTO. I ran to the main building. Incoming! Mr. Blake's shout ran down as I passed through the airlock. All hands on deck! Calm down, Captain Junior ordered. On the horizon, a tilt rotor craft whirred toward us. It's the guest we've been expecting. Let us make him feel welcome. The ship touched down in a flurry of sand, dirt, and rocks. When its rear cargo door opened, we saw 3 men. Well, actually just 1 man. The other 2 are guard bots, escorting a prisoner. This is your gunfighter? I asked Captain Junior in disgust.
Patience, Martin. He smiled through the viewport at the approaching group. The prisoner looked like a homeless guy. His cheap EVA helmet could not contain stingy brown hair flowing into an unkempt beard.
Scarred brown hands in plastic cuffs hung at the front of stained orange prisoner scrubs. The bot pleasantly modulated voice flowed through our speaker. Please open your airlock to allow access. You have to hand it to Mars-Sec, Mr. Blake commented as they rotated through the winged airlock hatch. Even the guard bots are polite when they're ready to kill you. Quiet, Captain Junior said. Then they were in our command center. One bot handed over a custody receipt while the other removed the prisoner's cuffs. As they turned to leave, Captain Junior looked at the prisoner.
Where are the other fighters you promised us? The grubby-looking man stirred. Right here. He mumbled, You ready to broadcast on that frequency I gave you? Oh, yes. Captain Junior fumbled in his shirt pocket, producing a scrap of paper. I set that up a few hours ago. Do it now, the stranger continued, before they leave. He recited a string of digits, which Captain Junior punched into our transceiver. What is this supposed to do? I asked. Quiet, Martin. Broadcasting. I turned to see the guard bots, now almost to the rear cargo door. Suddenly, they sagged, like someone had cut their power. They're in maintenance mode, the man crowed. Give me that memory stick. Hurry, we only have a few seconds. Captain Junior tossed him one of the two mem sticks he held in a fresh EVA helmet as they ran for the airlock. Together, both men cycled to the outside and ran to the frozen guard bots. I watched them from the comm center's window. The men worked to unlock the guard bots' armored access ports. Then the mem sticks were inserted, uploading something into the robot's memory. Mr. Blake appeared, joining me at the window. What's happening? You got me, I shrugged. They're doing something to the guard bots. I hope they know what they're doing, Mr. Blake grumbled. If those bots think they're being hijacked, they'll start screaming. MozSec will come down on top of us like a ton of bricks. They're jailbreaking the robots? I guess so.
Captain Junior and the other guy stood back to let the robots bootstrap with their changed OS. In seconds, the bots were back online and responding to the man's orders. Our gunfighter had arrived with his army, courtesy of Mars Security. Call everyone outside, Captain Junior ordered us. There is work to be done. Within minutes, our crew had the tilt rotor stripped of its guns and gear. While we worked, the gunfighter tinkered with the ship's computer. I was curious about the gunfighter, so I snuck into the cockpit to watch him work. His hands were a nicotine-stained blur as they tapped out commands on the console. What are you doing?
Another going-away present. This ship will experience a nav failure on its return flight. Then it will drift off course and crash somewhere.
Won't they come looking for it? I asked. The man peered at me.
Name's Pete. What's yours?
Martin.
Well, Martin.
Pete gestured around the cockpit.
MarSec has hundreds of tilt rotor craft and thousands of guard bots. It costs more for them to fly out and analyze a plane crash than writing it off and building another one.
They have that much money?
Pete grinned. Everything's disposable to them, even people.
Why were you in jail?
First things first, kid.
Pete tapped a switch, and something began whining deep inside the airframe.
We need to get out of this thing before we crash with it.
We had just enough time to scramble out of the side hatch before the tilt rotor was taking off. As obedient as a cow walking to the slaughterhouse, the ship returned the way it came. Soon the sound of its rotors was only a memory. Peter assigned the jailbroken bots to watch the horizon. Then Mr. Joshua, Victoriaville's resident barber, demonstrated his talents on Pete's matted hair.
I feel like I'm back from the dead.
The gunfighter sighed.
Those new veg state prisons are no joke.
They really put you under? Mr. Joshua asked, running plastic-guarded hair clippers across Pete's scalp.
Yep. Knock you out, hook you up to a neural net processing center. Your brain becomes a node in the wetware supercomputer. Disgusting.
I guess I'm glad you had this all set up before you went in,
Captain Junior commented.
Noah built the ark before the rain, right?
Pete shrugged, studying the cheap tattoos across his knuckles.
Battlefield technician's work's gotta be good for something.
Is that how you did it? I asked.
Pete looked at me.
What, take over the bots? Sure, that's how I ended up in jail in the first place. InfoSec told me to test whether the guard bots were vulnerable to hacking. Sure enough, they were junk. Then WTO came calling. I wasn't supposed to prove that their new hotshot security product was useless. The next thing I know, I'm under arrest, charged with destruction of government property. They sent me to the brain bucket. That's all she wrote.
You're just a technician.
Mr. Joshua looked at Captain Junior. I thought you were going to hire a gunfighter. Don't kid yourself, Captain Junior answered. Peter and I worked on some projects on Earth before I shipped out. He peered at the now clean-shaven gunfighter. I'm glad you kept your notes together. My question is, what now? Pete stood from the ancient patched barber's chair and headed for the showers. You said they show up every few weeks, right? We'll be ready for 'em. Mr. Joshua wasn't reassured. But how will you do it? That, Pete grabbed up a towel, is what we have to work out. The men prepared for battle while I got sent back to my chores. It burned me up inside to be ordered off by Captain Junior like I didn't exist. No joke, I came to Victoriaville when I was 5, and I've been here for 10 years now. This was, hands down, the coolest thing that's ever happened since we got here. Then, just like that, I'm back to hauling fertilizer while history happens under my nose. Captain Junior refused to listen to my complaints. There's always room for bullets, Martin. Right now, we need beans. I screamed curses at everyone inside my EVA helmet where no one could hear me. Randy and I commiserated while driving loads of manure out to the domes on our quad roundabout. The veggie domes relied upon our cow poop to get the nutrients they needed to grow in Martian soil. This is our home. This is our land, he snarled, checking the water lines of our aquaculture grid. How can they leave us out of this?
Don't ask me, I griped. I'm labor, not management. Yeah, but Captain Junior, I cut Randy off. Captain Junior rides me harder than any other kid. Can't you see that? What's that supposed to be? Tough love? Whatever. I looked off into the distance. Something was moving out there. Hey, you see that? Yeah. Randy acted super casual as he activated his in-helmet optics. His dad had given him that last Christmas and it drove me nuts with jealousy. Victoriaville is located on the south rim of Victoria Crater. 7/10 of a click away on the other rim, a rooster tail of dust rose behind an unseen source. That doesn't look good. You think we should tell him? Yeah, let me... Randy was cut off as railgun fire exploded over our heads. In staccato flashes of memory, I recall ducking for cover with Randy behind the runabout. Behind us in town, the emergency alarm began to wail through the Martian atmosphere. Us kids had never seen a gun battle before. It caught us completely by surprise. Nothing prepares you for the rush of fear and adrenaline that comes from getting shot at. A coppery taste pushed up through my nose as I crouched behind our little electric vehicle. Before I could cry, scream, or wet myself, armored gauntlets were gripping me under my armpits. Get up, kid, Pete ordered, shoving Randy and me towards the comm center. Back behind the domes. Get to the bunkers as quickly as you can. What about you? I asked as he unslung his shoulder-mounted railgun. Kneeling to occupy the space we just exited, Pete threw a rock at me. Quit asking stupid questions and move! Randy and I obeyed, sprinting for home like scared rabbits. Halfway to the compound, we met Captain Junior and Randy's dad, also carrying railguns. Pete's out there by himself, I yelled to Captain Junior as soon as I saw him. No, he isn't, Captain Junior snapped. Get below, the show's about to start. Show? What show? Pete's little demonstration, Mr. Blake answered. Stop talking and start moving. They led us to the bunker where everyone crowded around banks of security monitors. Someone trained one of our best cameras on Pete, letting us see him in action. Our gunfighter won the battle hours and days ago. His winning strategy was based on the new code he had given to the guard bots. Instead of Pete's keepers, they became his fighters. The hunters have become the hunted, Captain Junior murmured as we stared at the screen. Most mil-spec hovercraft max out at 30 or 40 kilometers an hour. No match for Pete's robotic bodyguards, who looped along like cheetahs at speeds up to 100. In seconds, the androids pounced on the hovercraft and began to tear them apart. Hovercrafts cannot travel without a solid airbag under them, so the bots pierced them first. Next, the android slammed carbon fiber mandibles through the cockpit glass. Our enemy's cockpits were now open to the atmosphere. You can't fight if your pilot can't breathe. By the time the mercs got their emergency air masks deployed, it was all over. The bots defeated our marauders before they knew what hit them. Back in the bunker, we went berserk with relief. Our entire population laughed, cried, and celebrated. Even Mom, our resident introvert, was jubilant. "We're free! It's finally over!" she cried. Captain Junior shook his head at us like a parent at misbehaving children.
"You're fooling yourselves if you think this is over."
"What do you mean?" I asked.
"You'll see."
Meanwhile, Pete radioed back, requesting an armed posse to go out to the wrecks. Captain Junior let Randy and me tag along.
"We might not end the war today, but we can try."
We arrived to find the disarmed mercs lined up by Pete and his guard bots.
"Nice work,"
Captain Junior said as we drew near. The gunfighter grinned, nodded towards our unhappy prisoners.
"Just like they say in the sales pitch. Work's easy when labor is free."
"Indeed," Captain Junior murmured. To our attackers, he said,
"I'm very sorry we didn't meet under better circumstances, gentlemen."
One of the mercenaries shook his head.
"Nothing personal, buddy."
Captain Junior stared at him.
"Speak for yourself. It might be your job, but this is our life."
He gestured back toward Victoriaville.
"We've got women, kids, and old people. We're trying to build a community. You think we'll walk away from that?"
"Whether you do or you don't," the mercenary said, "we have our orders." Jensen Blake shifted, fingering the trigger guard of his railgun. "You even have 'em standing in a row," he commented. "That makes it easy." Captain Junior ignored the comment, addressing our attackers. "Killing unarmed women and children? Is this what you signed up to do?"
"Hey, we never killed anyone,"
one merc announced.
"Every single one of you is alive, and you know it."
"You left us to starve or freeze," Mr. Blake growled. "You think that makes a difference?" The merc shrugged.
"You guys want to stay out here where it's dangerous. You put your family in harm's way, not me."
"Victoriaville was never dangerous until you got here," Captain Junior said. "But that stops today. You and your men have been here 3 times now. You won't come again." "Darn right they won't." Mr. Blake shouldered his railgun.
"We're gonna bury 'em right here."
"Hold it right there, Blake." Captain Junior stepped in front of him. "We won't win that way." The gunfighter blinked in surprise.
"You're gonna leave them alive?"
Captain Junior shook his head.
"I'm not like that anymore, Pete," he said.
I wondered what he meant by that.
"We took their guns away. That's enough."
"But they'll come back," Randy said.
"Not if they have any sense."
Jensen Blake snorted. "You've always been afraid to get your hands dirty. That's what I think." Captain Junior looked down his nose at Randy's father.
"You think about your family, and you think about your life, Jensen. What will they do if you kill these men? How long will it be until twice as many men are over the horizon? They send bots, and they'll be shooting to kill. I'm not bleeding out face down in the sand so you can have your moment of vengeance."
Captain Junior's gaze swept across the other men's faces, then the captured mercenaries.
"That goes for you as well. We didn't start this, but we finished it. It ends here."
The mercenary leader's face twisted with anger.
"This isn't finished," he snarled. "Not by a long shot." "No, it is finished," Captain Junior said. "You can tell Benjamin Carlyle I said so." "You know how that works. That's what you did to Erebus after they left." He pointed off into the distance. "Your home is that way. I suggest you start walking."
"But that's 20 kilometers away. We'll freeze."
Pete snorted. "Not in those fancy battle suits."
He nodded at the horizon.
"Sun's going down. You don't want to have to find your way back in the dark.
The mercenaries began moving reluctantly, and the guard bots shepherded them along. Soon, all that remained were tracks stretching to the horizon.
Well done, Captain,
Mr. Joshua said. He had come along with us, but refused to carry a railgun.
You want to start the smashing? Or should I? Leave them, Captain Junior answered. That was for show. We have enough steel as it is.
Mr. Blake looked sour. You're sure going out of your way to make them happy.
No, I'm going out of my way to not give them an excuse.
Captain Junior began walking back to Victoriaville.
Great job, Pete. First round's on me.
Captain Junior let me hang out, sample the beer, and listen to their stories as long as I kept my mouth shut. It was cool getting to drink some beer and hang out with the guys, but it drove me a little crazy. None of their conversations made any sense.
As I said, Martin,
Captain Junior nodded to Pete.
We worked some operations together back on Earth. Yeah, the captain here is one of the Black Devils.
I looked at the captain to see him wearing an uncomfortable expression.
They rolled over Rhodesia in the Second Bush War.
Pete helped himself to a freshly made sandwich from the food compilers.
Almost made him a warlord, too.
Captain Junior shook his head and poured himself another beer.
Thank God for the transport. That's what got me away.
So you left Earth? I asked.
The thing about war is that if you win, you're a hero. If you lose, you're a criminal. They offered me a deal, and I took it. I can never go home again.
Captain Junior's eyes focused on something I couldn't see.
There's nothing to go back to anyway. What does that mean?
Randy wanted to know.
It means this is my home, Randy.
Captain Junior smiled, dismissing the topic.
That's all you need to worry about. He's a modern-day Cincinnatus,
the gunfighter said.
He became king to save the country, only to return to his farm when peace was restored.
Pete raised his glass in tribute.
To Cincinnatus!
To Cincinnatus! To Cincinnatus! The men roared, downing their beers. Randy and I cheered and laughed along with the men, enjoying the first good moment we'd had in a long while. Then the CCS pinged and destroyed our mood.
Called for Captain Junior,
Mr. Joshua said, over the communications control system.
Incoming video from the WTO.
Captain Junior sighed.
No rest for the wicked,
he said as he climbed out of his chair. Randy and I waited until he was gone from the room before slipping away. In the comm center, we have a little hidey hole in the storage closet. You can sit there and hear everything the adults say. The captain was going to tell our unfriendly neighbors off. There was no way we were going to miss that. We tiptoed into position as Captain Junior accepted the call.
Junior here. I can't believe you did this,
an angry voice said.
Ah, Carlisle,
the captain said, identifying the speaker for me.
You should have been there. We just tapped a new keg of beer. Where are you getting beer from? We produced too much wheat this year,
Junior answered, like they talked every day.
That I decided to see if we could put it to good use.
Sounds like your farming operations are going well.
Carlisle sniffed.
They are, actually. No thanks to you.
I suppose you think that was funny.
I don't see anyone laughing. You made a mistake, Junior. I prefer to call it making the best of a bad situation.
You damaged my property.
Only the force necessary to restrain, sir.
Captain Junior shifted in his chair.
We defended unarmed women and children from an unprovoked attack. Our report to MARSEC will include the raw video. I'll send you a copy if you like.
A noise came from the cheap speaker that sounded like a derisive snort.
We don't need their permission to protect our assets.
Is that what you're calling Victoriaville? Your asset?
I'm talking about the hovercraft. I hope you haven't turned them into anything vital. You won't like it when my demo crew comes to rip them apart.
They're on the ridge right where we left them, Captain Junior said. You can come and take them home.
You said you were going to reclaim them.
I could hear the fabric of Captain Junior's shirt scratch against the chair as he shrugged.
No sense in making this harder than it is. I think you're afraid. You think what you like, Captain Junior said.
We didn't have to leave your men alive, but we did. Victoriaville is going out of its way to solve this problem peacefully. But this is our home. We're not leaving.
We'll see about that.
I could hear the smile in Captain Junior's voice when he said,
Yes, I suppose you will.
He broke the connection. Then he made me jump by saying,
You get all that?
For a heartbeat, Randy and I worried that Captain Junior was talking to us.
Yeah,
we heard Pete say. He must have come in to listen too.
I thought you handled it well.
Thanks. What do you think?
You already know what I think. The question is, are they smart enough to leave us alone?
There was no mistaking the bitterness in Captain Junior's voice.
Who? Carlisle or Victoriaville? Tough job being in the middle,
Pete said.
You should know that by now.
Makes you wish you still had somebody like the UN to be the bad guy. Out here, the only problems you have are the ones that you bring with you.
Pete grunted in agreement. Mm-hmm. So now what?
We'll see. I called his bluff about those wrecks. If we recycled them, he'd come to reclaim his property. God knows what would happen next.
Thanks for listening. Once again, if you like what you hear, please take a moment to hit those like and subscribe buttons so you can hear when we put out new stories. You can purchase an ebook copy of The Battle of Victoria Crater at Inkican.com/braintacos. If you'd like to hire me for voice acting, my Instagram handle is JeremiahJonesVO. Stay tuned for part 2, which is coming up soon. Jackson and I appreciate you joining us. We'll see you down the road.